Before I begin today, there are two women I'd like you to know have made this church possible and have made possible what I say to you on Sunday morning. Back in 2009, when I lost my job at another church, I was ready to move to Texas and take a job in Tornado Alley. But the person who means the most to me said, no, the people here want us to start a church here. And so, Mary, if it worked for you, there would be no Faith Family, and I thank you that you wouldn't let me quit and kick me in the butt when I needed it. The other person I want to thank, today would have been my mother's 97th birthday, and I didn't pick this day, Leslie did, but it worked out. And every Sunday morning for the last 10 years, I've used my mother's mug to drink my coffee in the morning before service and asked her to help me say what it is I needed to say. And so I thank my mom for all the goodness and grace she's brought to us by virtue of the fact we both drank coffee. Today I want to share with you the opening to Paul's letter to the church at Philippi. Paul's founded a bunch of churches. We're aware of the fact that there are 13 letters to these churches that are attributed to him, and that this is one of the shortest, the letter to the church at Philippi. In modern translation, it's about 4 pages long, that's all. And yet it's such a powerful message that we hear. And we hear it because Paul's writing to them because he can't visit them because he's in prison. We know from Acts of the Apostles that he spent time in prison, and people think that he may have spent the time that he wrote this letter in a prison in Rome, but others think it might have been in Caesarea because that's closer to this church in Philippi. And so he wrote this letter. Here's my English background coming out. I want to talk about the tone of the letter. The tone of the letter is a tone of encouragement. And if you go and you read those long 4 pages sometime today or this week, you'll see that Paul was encouraging the folks at this church to do 2 things. One of those things was to be united with each other. Not to be divided or divisive, but to be united. And the second thing he asked was that the people in Philippi at that church approach each other with humility, because he saw that those that were not humble and approached others in a different manner lost sight of who the other person was. And he wanted always the focus to be on the other person, on the other person, on the person sitting next to you or in front of you or behind you. So that was the tone. Jacob Myers says of the themes in the letter that there are 4. And of those 4 themes, he says, and this one is overriding, and that's one of the reasons that this reading works so well for us today. But the overriding theme in this letter is that of joy. That he was in such joy that this church was doing what it was doing, and in such joy that they could do it without him being there. That they could together move as Spirit moved them, and be one as Spirit led them, and reach out with hands that always were there to help someone else. And so the theme of joy is the overriding theme. And I suppose the others, if I were being technical, are more like motifs than themes, but they come under that heading. He was also talking thematically in terms of partnership, that we were in partnership with one another, that the people in the church were in partnership not just with him, but with each other, and in partnership with the Spirit and with Jesus, who called us all together to be one. The third thing that he talked about was the theme of love, that there would always be love, an overriding love for each other, that would permeate the church and the people, so that everybody who came to that church and everybody who went forth from that church would know that they were loved. loved by the people there, and loved because of the God who called the people to be there. And the fourth theme was the theme of confidence in God's presence among them. That they would never forget that the reason they came into existence was because of Jesus Christ, and that he was the head of the church and would always be there to lead them, to call them, and honestly, to pick them up and brush them off when they fell down, because we know that happens when we are in church together. Jacob Myers says that the church is community because God called it to be community. And I have for the last 10 years used that term consistently. I think there's a difference between community and fellowship. I'm not a fellow, so I feel excluded when people use that term to describe church. But community means that there is common unity among us, that everybody is important to everybody else, and all of us are important to God. Theologian Amy Lindemann Allen talks about the underlying message in this letter. And she says, Paul lived in a world where Jesus could declare that the greatest commandment of all was to love God with your whole heart, your whole soul, your whole being, and to love your neighbor as yourself. She goes on to say, and I pause here to ask you, does that sound familiar? Those who were present 10 years ago, do you remember when we wrote that? That we said the great commandment needs to be the mission statement of this church. But Amy Lindemann Allen goes on to say, my prayer is that we learn to put others before ourselves. My prayer is that we learn how to accurately assess risks. And my prayer is that we begin to follow the example of Jesus so much that even when the risks may seem to grow, we take seriously the full humanity and basic human rights of all God's children across this globe. Those are pretty good prayers. And I guess what I want to do is echo for you some of what I see and hear and feel and find in Paul's prayer to the church he founded at Philippi. And so my prayer for you, my dear faith family, is somewhat like Paul's. It is a prayer of gratitude for all you've been to me and all you've given me, all you've shown me, all the ways you helped me to see when I missed the mark, how it was that I could get back up, and you would give me a helping hand and lift me up so that together we could go on about the work of Jesus Christ. It is a prayer of love that cannot be destroyed or taken away. I have told you for 10 years that no one and nobody anywhere in this globe or universe of ours can take you away from the love of God. I hope you remember that, because I think that is so critical for all of us. Mine is a prayer that trusts the Spirit of God will remain with you always. That you will listen for Spirit's call, and you will respond to Spirit's call. Because all we have to do is have ears that hear and eyes that see to find where our way is leading us in this world that is so messed up at times we cannot even turn on the news. It is a prayer filled with joy. Even as I leave to follow God's new call to my heart, and I don't know what that is, it's a prayer of joy for all the good and goodness and grace and generosity that I find among you, do you share so unabashedly and unconditionally, not just with me and with each other, but with everybody who comes here and everybody to whom you reach out as you leave here before you return. It's a prayer that believes you will continue to live out the good news of God's love for everybody. No exceptions. Every single person has been created in God's very image. It's a prayer that your love for one another will indeed overflow and fill our community, our nation, and our world, so that the other things that people try to have and make powerful, like greed and lust and self-interest and hatred and Islamophobia and homophobia and transphobia and anti-Semitism and all those other things I'll forget, that they will never ever win, because love always wins, just like the t-shirts say. A prayer that is confident your mission statement will not remain words on a page, but come alive day after day as you embody Jesus' commandment to love with all of who you are and to love your neighbor as yourself. A prayer that you will never stop believing that the God who created you in love, for love, to be loved, and to be loving, will always and forever be with you. Through your darkest days and your most joyous times, this God who hugs us and holds us and breathes life into us and hugs us so close that our hearts beat in rhythm with this gospel, that's what I hope you never stop believing. You are so dear to God that God would be missing something if you weren't part of God's day. So make God part of your day and let God be part of yours. And so my prayer echoes that which is found in Paul's letter for the Philippians, which begins this way. I thank my God every time I remember you, constantly praying with joy in every one of my prayers for all of you, because of your sharing in the gospel from the very first day until now. I am confident of this, that the one who began a good work among you will bring it to completion by the day of Jesus Christ. And this is my prayer, that your love may overflow more and more with knowledge and full insight to help you to determine what is best, so that in the day of Christ you may be pure and blameless, having produced the harvest of righteousness, known here as right relations, that comes through Jesus Christ for the praise and glory of God. Live your life in a manner worthy of the gospel of Christ, so that whether I come and see you or am absent and hear about you, I will know that you are standing firm in one spirit, striving side by side with one mind for the faith of the gospel, and are in no way intimidated by your opponents. May it be so. Amen. Alleluia. Amen. I just want to remind folks before, we're not doing a trio, we're just doing a duet? For those of you who are new, you need to get that joke from someone. That we said last week that when we passed the plate for the offering, If somebody wanted to contribute to the Immokalee Fair Housing Alliance project, then you would either write that in the memo line of your check or put it on an envelope. So we're gonna just pass the plates once. If you forget, where's Jan? Jan, if you forget, find Jan later and give her whatever for Immokalee. So this is a collection both for Faith Family, but also if you have a separate check or envelope for Immokalee. We hope you will be part of that today, if you can, and if you wish. Thank you. On behalf of all the lives you will touch because of your offering, The offering we make financially here and the offering that goes in this plate each week, when you place your hands,